I never thought my peaceful life would unravel like this. As the owner of a small-town bakery, my days were filled with the comforting sense of freshly baked bread and the warm smiles of my regular customers. But this morning, everything changed when I received the first of those anonymous text messages. It was just a normal Wednesday, and I was prepping the shop for the day's business, humming along to the radio as I mixed the dough. My phone buzzed, and I glanced down, expecting a message from my twin daughters, Ava and Zoe, or perhaps my best friend Marla. But the number was unfamiliar, and the message made my heart skip a beat. "Your husband Elliot is having an affair. Here's proof." Attached were several photographs, each one more damning than the last. There was Elliot, my husband of 18 years, embracing a woman I didn't recognize in a secluded corner of the high school parking lot. Another showed them locked in a passionate kiss, oblivious to the world around them. "No, this can't be true," I whispered, my hands trembling as I stared at the incriminating images. Elliot, a respected high school teacher, couldn't be cheating on me. We had built a life together, raised our daughters, and weathered so many challenges. How could he do this? I tried to call Elliot, but he didn't answer. Panic and confusion gripped me as I paced the bakery, wondering if I should confront him or wait until he came home. The nameless sender had promised more proof, and I knew I had to get to the bottom of this. Hours later, Elliot walked through the door, his expression casual, unaware of the turmoil I was experiencing. "Honey, I'm home," he called out, hanging up his coat. "How was your day?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. "Elliot, we need to talk. Now." He must have sensed the urgency in my voice because he followed me into the kitchen, his brow furrowed with concern. "What's wrong, Cora? You look upset." "I received some disturbing messages today," I began, my voice trembling. "They claim you're having an affair, and they've sent me photographs to prove it." Elliot's eyes widened, and for a moment I saw a flicker of guilt cross his features. But just as quickly, his expression hardened, and he shook his head vehemently. "That's ridiculous. I would never cheat on you, Cora. This is some kind of sick joke." "Then explain the photos," I demanded, thrusting my phone towards him. "Explain why you were embracing and kissing another woman in the school parking lot." Elliot stared at the images, his face paling. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence was deafening, and I could feel my heart sinking. "Elliot, please," I pleaded, my eyes desperately searching his. "Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you haven't been betraying our family." He averted his gaze, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I'm so sorry, Cora. I don't know what to say." In that moment, my world shattered. The man I had loved and trusted for so many years had been lying to me all along. Tears streamed down my face as the reality of his betrayal sank in. "How could you do this to us?" I cried, the pain in my voice palpable. "To our daughters, after everything we've been through?" Elliot reached out to me, but I recoiled, unwilling to let him touch me. "Don't," I snapped, my voice laced with anguish and anger. "Just don't." I stormed out of the bakery, leaving Elliot behind, my heart heavy with the weight of his deception. As I drove away, I couldn't help but wonder how our lives had come to this. The unraveling had begun, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The drive home was a blur, my mind racing with a torrent of emotions. Betrayal, anger, heartbreak. I couldn't believe the man I loved, the father of my children, had betrayed our family in the most devastating way. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Elliot's car was already there. He was waiting for me, his expression a mix of guilt and worry. The moment I stepped through the front door, he approached me, reaching out to touch my arm. "Cora, please, let me explain," he pleaded, his voice laced with desperation. I recoiled from his touch, glaring at him with a fury I had never known before. "Explain what, Elliot? That you're having an affair with some woman from your school? That you've been lying to me and our daughters for who knows how long?" His gaze faltered, and he let out a heavy sigh. "It's not what you think. The photos, they're what, Elliot?" I interrupted, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Fabricated? Photoshopped? I don't want to hear your excuses. Those pictures are real, and you know it." Elliot ran his fingers through his hair, a gesture I had seen him do 1,000 times when he was stressed or uncertain. "Okay, yes, the photos are real, but it's not what it looks like, I swear. Lana and I we're just friends." I scoffed, my disbelief palpable. Friends don't embrace and kiss like that in a secluded parking lot, Elliot. Stop lying to me and stop lying to yourself. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, silencing him. Save it. I don't want to hear any more of your lies. You've betrayed me, betrayed our family, and I won't stand for it. Ava and Zoe, our twin daughters, chose that moment to enter the room, their faces etched with concern. Mom? Dad? What's going on? Ava asked, her brow furrowed. I glanced at them, my heart breaking at the thought of how this would affect their lives. They didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of our marital turmoil. Nothing, honey, I said, forcing a smile. Your father and I just need to have a private conversation, that's all. Zoe looked from me to Elliot, her eyes narrowing. But you two are fighting. What's wrong? Elliot started to speak, but I quickly cut him off. It's nothing for you girls to worry about. Why don't you go upstairs and work on your homework? Your father and I will be up shortly. The twins exchanged a worried glance, but reluctantly obeyed, leaving Elliot and me alone once more. Cora, please, you have to believe me, Elliot pleaded, his eyes desperate. I would never do anything to hurt you or the girls. Lana and I, we're just close friends, that's all. I shook my head, my resolve hardening. I don't believe you, Elliot. The evidence is right there in black and white. You're having an affair, and I won't stand for it. Elliot opened his mouth to protest, but I raised my hand, silencing him. I need time to think. I can't be around you right now. With that, I turned and headed upstairs, leaving Elliot behind, his pleas echoing in my ears. As I closed the door to our bedroom, I felt the weight of the world pressing down on me. I had to find a way to expose Elliot's betrayal, to ensure he and his mistress faced the consequences of their actions. But first, I needed to figure out my next move. The next few days were a blur of conflicting emotions. I couldn't shake the images of Elliot and that woman, Lana, locked in a passionate embrace. The mere thought of it made my stomach churn with a mixture of betrayal and rage. I knew I couldn't confront Elliot again until I had solid proof. The anonymous messages and photos were a good start, but I needed more to expose his lies and ensure there were consequences for his actions. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I started following Elliot, waiting outside the high school during his planning periods and tailing him whenever he left the house. It felt like a betrayal of my own, but I was desperate to uncover the truth. After several fruitless days, I finally caught a break. One afternoon, I spotted Elliot leaving the school and getting into his car. I waited a few minutes before starting my own engine and pulling out onto the road, careful to keep a safe distance. To my surprise, Elliot didn't head straight home. Instead, he drove to a small, nondescript apartment building on the other side of town. My heart raced as I watched him park and head inside, and I knew in that moment that my suspicions were correct. Mustering my courage, I parked my car a few blocks away and approached the building. I pressed the buzzer for the apartment Elliot had entered, and a woman's voice crackled through the intercom. Yes? Who is it? Lana? I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of nerves and determination. This is Cora Ashton. We need to talk. There was a brief pause, and then the door clicked open. I steeled myself and pushed it open, stepping inside the dimly lit hallway. As I climbed the stairs, I could hear voices coming from one of the apartments. I paused outside the door, my hand trembling as I raised it to knock. The door swung open, and there stood Lana, a smug grin on her face. Well, if it isn't the esteemed Mrs. Ashton, to what do I owe this pleasure? I didn't bother with pleasantries. You know exactly why I'm here, Lana. I want you to stop seeing my husband. Lana's eyes narrowed and she let out a cruel laugh. Oh, I don't think so. Your husband and I have a special connection, you see. One that you could never hope to understand. I felt my blood boil at her arrogance. Special connection? You're having an affair, Lana. You're betraying my family, and I won't stand for it. Lana leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed over her chest. And what are you going to do about it, Your husband is a grown man, and he made the choice to be with me. You have no one to blame but yourself. Her words stung, and I felt tears of rage and frustration welling up in my eyes. You're despicable, I spat. How dare you try to justify what you're doing? Lana shrugged, her expression unrepentant. I'm not the one who's betraying anyone, Cora. Your husband is the one who made the choice to cheat on you. If you have a problem with that, take it up with him. Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind the door, and Elliot appeared, his face a mask of panic and guilt. "Cora, what are you doing here?" I turned to him, my eyes burning with a fury I had never known before. "I'm doing what you won't, Elliot. I'm putting an end to this thing between you and Lana." Elliot's eyes widened and he glanced nervously between Lana and me. "Cora, please, let me explain." "Save it," I snapped. "I don't want to hear your lies anymore. It's over, Elliot. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you've done." With that, I turned and stormed away, my heart pounding in my chest. I had finally confronted the truth, and now it was time to take action. As I drove away from Lana's apartment, my mind was racing with a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, and a deep sense of hurt threatened to overwhelm me, but I knew I couldn't let it consume me. I had to stay focused and determined if I was going to expose Elliot and Lana's affair. The next day, I confided in my closest friend, Marla, who worked at the high school as a secretary. I knew I could trust her to keep this delicate information to herself, and I desperately needed her help. "Marla, I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice trembling. "Elliot is having an affair with Lana, one of the new art teachers. I confronted them, but they're not even trying to hide it anymore." Marla's eyes widened in shock, and she reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Oh, Cora, I'm so sorry. That's horrible. I can't believe Elliot would do that to you and the girls." I nodded, my throat tight with unshed tears. "I know. I need to find a way to expose them to make them face the consequences of their actions, but I can't do it alone. Will you help me, Marla?" Marla didn't hesitate. "Of course, Cora. Whatever you need, I'm here for you. We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise." Together, we started gathering evidence. Marla used her position at the school to discreetly observe Elliot and Lana's interactions, taking notes and snapping candid photos whenever she could. Meanwhile, I continued to follow Elliot, documenting his secret meetings with Lana and piecing together a timeline of their affair. It was painstaking, meticulous work, but we knew we couldn't afford to miss a single detail. The stakes were too high, and we were determined to ensure Elliot and Lana faced the consequences of their actions. One day, as Marla and I were reviewing our findings, we stumbled upon a particularly damning piece of evidence. It was a series of text messages between Elliot and Lana discussing their plans to take a weekend trip together, away from prying eyes. "This is it, Cora," Marla said, her voice hushed but triumphant. "With this, we have everything we need to expose their affair and get them held accountable." I nodded, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and anticipation. "Then let's do it. I'm ready to put an end to this nightmare." The next day, we presented our evidence to the school board, the tension in the room palpable. Elliot and Lana sat side by side, their faces pale and their eyes downcast as we laid out the damning truth. When we finished, the board members erupted into a flurry of outrage and condemnation. Elliot and Lana were immediately suspended, pending a full investigation, and the scandal quickly spread through the community. As I watched the fallout unfold, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. Justice was being served, and the consequences of Elliot and Lana's actions were finally catching up to them. But even as the town rallied around me, offering their support and sympathy, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of sadness and betrayal. This wasn't how I wanted my life to turn out. But now that the truth was out, I knew there was no going back. I had to face the aftermath, and that meant filing for divorce and fighting for full custody of my daughters. It was going to be a long and painful road, but I was determined to emerge stronger and more resilient than ever before. As the news of Elliot and Lana's affair spread through the community, the backlash was swift and unforgiving. Outraged parents and students demanded their immediate termination, and the school board was forced to take swift action. Marla and I had presented our evidence at a packed board meeting, and the reaction was explosive. Lana, in particular, seemed unfazed by the consequences of her actions, her arrogance only fueling the anger in the room. After the meeting adjourned, Marla and I decided to confront Lana directly. We needed to make sure she understood the gravity of her betrayal and the irreparable harm she had caused our family. As we approached Lana's classroom, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I had to be strong and unwavering in my resolve. Lena was packing up her belongings when we entered the room, her expression impassive. Well, if it isn't the dynamic duo, she drawled, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Come to gloat, have you? Marla stepped forward, her eyes narrowed with contempt. Gloat? Hardly. We're here to make sure you understand the consequences of your actions, Lana. What you've done to Cora and her family is unforgivable. Lana let out a cruel laugh, her gaze shifting to me. Oh, I understand the consequences perfectly well, Marla. Cora here has made sure of that, hasn't she? I felt my anger boiling over, and I moved closer to Lana, my voice trembling with rage. How dare you? I hissed. How dare you stand there and act so callous about what you've done? You've destroyed my family, and you don't even seem to care. Lana's expression darkened, and she crossed her arms over her chest. I'm not the one who destroyed your family, Cora. Your husband made the choice to betray you, not me. If you have a problem with that, take it up with him. I shook my head, my vision blurring with tears of frustration. No, Lana, you're just as much to blame as Elliot. You knew he was married, you knew he had a family, and you still chose to pursue this affair with him? You're a homewrecker, and I won't let you get away with it. Lana's eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer to me, her voice low and menacing. A homewrecker, huh? Well, if that's the case, then I guess I'm the one who's going to be left standing in the end, aren't I? Because let's be honest, Cora, your marriage was already on the rocks long before I came along. I felt the blood drain from my face, her words cutting me like a knife. How dare you? I whispered, my voice trembling. You know nothing about my marriage. Nothing. Lana shrugged, an infuriating smirk playing on her lips. Maybe not, but I do know that Elliot chose me, Cora, and that's got a sting, doesn't it? I couldn't hold back my tears any longer, and they streamed down my face as I glared at Lana, my hands balled into fists at my sides. You're a vile, despicable woman, Lana, and I swear I'm going to make sure you and Elliot pay for what you've done. Lana's expression darkened, and she took a step back, her eyes narrowing. We'll see about that, Cora. You may have the upper hand for now, but this isn't over. Not by a long shot. With that, she turned and strode out of the room, leaving Marla and me alone in the echoing silence. I wiped the tears from my face, my resolve hardening. Lana may have thought she had the upper hand, but I was more determined than ever to bring her and Elliot down, no matter the cost. The days following our confrontation with Lana were a whirlwind of activity. Marla and I spent countless hours poring over the evidence we had gathered, meticulously organizing and preparing our case. We knew that exposing Elliot and Lana's affair at the school board meeting was just the beginning. The community was in an uproar, with parents and students demanding swift action. The school board had been forced to suspend Elliot and Lana, but we knew that wasn't enough. They had to face the full consequences of their actions, and I was determined to ensure that happened. When the day of the school board meeting arrived, the tension in the room was palpable. Elliot and Lana sat side by side, their faces etched with worry and apprehension. I could feel their eyes on me as Marla and I took our seats, our evidence carefully organized on the table in front of us. The board members filed in, their expressions grim. The superintendent cleared his throat and called the meeting to order, his voice stern. We are here today to address the serious allegations brought against two of our esteemed faculty members, Elliot Ashton and Lana Morris. These allegations, if true, would constitute a severe breach of trust and a violation of our school's code of conduct. He turned his gaze to Marla and me, his brow furrowed. Mrs. Ashton, Mrs. Jensen, you have presented us with a considerable amount of evidence. I would like you to present it to the board so that we can determine the appropriate course of action. I took a deep breath, steeling my nerves, and stood up. All eyes were on me as I began laying out the timeline of Elliot and Lana's affair, detailing the secret meetings, the text messages, and the photographic evidence we had gathered. As I spoke, I could feel the tension in the room growing, the air thick with a palpable sense of betrayal and outrage. Elliot and Lana sat in silence, their faces etched with fear and guilt. When I finished, the board members erupted into a flurry of discussion, their voices raised in anger and disbelief. The superintendent held up his hand, silencing the room. This is a serious matter, he said, his voice grave. If these allegations are true, then Mr. Ashton and Miss Morris have engaged in a flagrant abuse of their positions of trust and authority. The implications for our school and our community are grave. He turned to Elliot and Lana, his expression stern. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Elliot stood up, his face pale and his voice trembling. I'm sorry, He glanced at Lana, who remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. The superintendent shook his head, his disappointment evident. That is not sufficient, Mr. Ashton. The evidence presented here is overwhelming. I have no choice but to recommend your immediate termination, pending a full investigation. Lana's head snapped up, her eyes flashing with rage. You can't do this, she cried, her voice shrill. This is a witch hunt, a conspiracy to ruin our careers. The superintendent fixed her with a steely gaze. Miss Morris, your actions have brought shame and disgrace upon this institution. I have no choice but to recommend your immediate dismissal as well. The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, with parents and students cheering and applauding the board's decision. Elliot and Lana sat in stunned silence, their faces etched with disbelief and defeat. As the meeting adjourned, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Justice had been served, and Elliot and Lana were facing the consequences of their actions. But even as I walked out of the room, I couldn't help but feel a bittersweet pang of sadness. This was not the outcome I had wanted, but it was the one I had had to fight for. The aftermath of the school board meeting was nothing short of explosive. Within hours, the news of Elliot and Lana's affair had spread like wildfire through the close-knit community, sparking outrage and condemnation. Elliot was immediately suspended from his teaching position, pending a full investigation. The school district had wasted no time in distancing itself from the scandal, determined to protect its reputation at all costs. As for Lana, her dismissal from the school was swift and decisive. The board's recommendation was met with thunderous applause from parents and students alike, who saw her as the villainous temptress who had torn our family apart. But the real fallout was felt within the walls of our own home. With Elliot suspended and the divorce proceedings underway, the tension between us was palpable. Ava and Zoe, our twin daughters, were caught in the middle, their faces etched with confusion and anguish. Mom, what's going on? Zoe asked one evening, her voice trembling. Why is Dad not coming home from work anymore? I sighed, my heart breaking at the sight of their distress. Your father and we're going through some difficult changes, honey, but I want you to know that it's not your fault, and that your father and I still love you both very much. Ava's brow furrowed, and she glanced nervously at her sister. But does this mean you and Dad are getting divorced? I hesitated, not wanting to burden them with the full weight of the situation. That's something we're still working through. But I promise, whatever happens, your father and I will always be here for you. Zoe's eyes filled with tears, and she rushed into my arms, her tiny body trembling. I don't want you and Dad to get divorced. Please, Mom, can't you forgive him? I held her close, my own tears threatening to fall. I wish it were that simple, sweetheart, but sometimes things happen that are just too difficult to forgive. Ava remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. I could see the anguish in her eyes, and my heart ached for the pain we were all going through. In the days that followed, the community rallied around me, offering their support and sympathy. Marla, my steadfast friend, was a constant presence, helping me navigate the legal and emotional minefield of the divorce proceedings. As for Elliot and Lana, they faced a barrage of public scrutiny and condemnation. Elliot's reputation as a respected teacher was irreparably tarnished, and his future in the school district hung in the balance. Lana, on the other hand, had become the town pariah, shunned by her colleagues and ostracized by the community. I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction at their fall from grace. They had betrayed my trust, destroyed my family, and they deserved to face the consequences of their actions. But even as I reveled in their comeuppance, a part of me couldn't help but feel a deep sense of sadness and loss. This wasn't how I had envisioned my life unfolding. But now, as I fought for full custody of my daughters and worked to rebuild my own life, I knew that there was no going back. The unraveling had begun, and all I could do was try to pick up the pieces and move forward, one step at a time. As the dust settled on the scandal that had rocked our community, I found myself navigating the uncharted waters of a new reality. The divorce had been finalized, and I had been granted full custody of Ava and Zoe. Elliot's reputation had been irreparably tarnished, and he was forced to leave the school district, leaving his teaching career in shambles. Lana, too, faced the consequences of her actions. The community ostracized her, and she was unable to find employment in the area, her own reputation destroyed by the fallout of the affair. In the midst of the upheaval, I found myself clinging to the one constant in my life, my beloved bakery. It was a sanctuary, a place where I could pour my heart and soul into creating something tangible and comforting. The familiar sense of freshly baked bread and the warm smiles of my loyal customers helped to soothe the ache in my heart. As I threw myself into my work, I also focused on rebuilding my relationship with Ava and Zoe. They had been through so much, and I was determined to give them the stability and support they needed. We spent countless hours talking, crying, and laughing together, forging a bond that was stronger than ever before. One day, as I was kneading the dough for my famous cinnamon rolls, Ava came up behind me, her arms wrapping around my waist. "Mom, I'm so proud of you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. I turned to face her, my eyes filled with tears. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm the one who should be proud of you and your sister. You've both been through so much, and you've handled it all with such grace and strength." Zoe joined us, her eyes shining with a newfound maturity. "We know it hasn't been easy, Mom, but we also know that you've fought for us, and that you'll always be there for us." I pulled them both into a tight embrace, my heart swelling with love and gratitude. "Always, my darlings, I will always be here for you, no matter what." As the weeks turned into months, I watched with pride as Ava and Zoe blossomed into confident, resilient young women. They were a constant source of joy and inspiration, and I knew that I had made the right decision to fight for them. Meanwhile, the bakery continued to thrive, with loyal customers flocking to my door in a show of unwavering support. I had become a respected figure in the community, a symbol of strength and resilience in the face of adversity. One day, as I was closing up the shop, Marla came bustling in, her face alight with excitement. "Cora, you'll never believe what I just heard," she exclaimed. I paused, my brow furrowed with curiosity. "What is it, Marla?" "Elliot and Lana, they've both been completely ostracized from the community," she said, her voice tinged with a hint of satisfaction. "Elliot couldn't find another teaching job, and Lana's been struggling to make ends meet. They're both pariahs, Cora." I felt a surge of mixed emotions, a sense of justice tempered by a lingering sadness. "I see," I murmured, my gaze drifting to the empty bakery. "I suppose that's the price they had to pay for their betrayal." Marla nodded, her expression softening. "But you, Cora, you've come out of this stronger than ever. The town adores you, and your business is thriving. You're a true inspiration to us all." I felt a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "I suppose I am," I said, my voice tinged with quiet pride. "And you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way." As I locked up the bakery and headed home to my daughters, I couldn't help but feel a sense of renewed purpose. The unraveling had been painful, but it had also forged me into a more resilient, independent woman. And with Ava and Zoe by my side, I knew that the future held endless possibilities.